about it. Why is it that when I have a cool drink of water, I feel better? Why is it that Africa as a tradition, as almost a universal tradition, when you come to Africa, particularly in West Africa, you come to a house, the first thing folk do is sit you down, offer you a stool and a cool drink of water. Before you, I don't want to know nothing about what you're here for. I don't want to know nothing about. First, sit down, rest yourself, and have a cool drink of water. And what does Maat mean when it says water satisfies the thirst? We have to understand these universal laws. Maat becomes a critical piece of understanding because it is the organizing principle that the ancients used to talk about a way of life. See, we do the surface stuff. We say, oh yeah, I can memorize. Maat is truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, propriety, and order. I got those 7 things. Like my mentality can only handle me reciting 7 little silly things. You see, we're deeper than that. We're people who are deeper than that. We got to understand that this ethical system was not just 7 virtues. It was a way of life. It was a way of correcting and reflecting the community's intention. I could ask a question. Let's stop right now and don't come back together until we clarify what is our intention. Think about that term. Old folks used to do it all the time. You come dating some little girl, Big Daddy would sit you down in his presence and say, boy, what is your intention? See, that's the question. What is your intention? You know, even though you got all this wrong thought in your mind. And as a young man, all the brothers in the room know this. And we got to figure out how to relate what I plan to do, which is a lie, to a man who knows my energy in my spirit, who can read my lie, and he's going to ask me to say out loud the lie. You see? And so that was a social control that we've given up. Now we'll say, baby, he's honking for you. Your friend is here. This brother's outside honking his car, asking your daughter to come out. As opposed to saying, get your ass out that car, come in this house, and tell me what is your intention. You see, we have to understand that we had a way. And the way was Maatian. The way was Maatian that spoke more than just these cardinal virtues. Maat had to do with something called Sa-Ma'at. The recognition of Maat. How do you recognize it? You recognize it in the theology. You recognize it in the philosophy. So we got to go back and look at, when we study philosophy, we accept this philosophy, oh, I'm a Marxist. No. Do you see Ma'at in it? See? Sa-Ma'at. How do you recognize Ma'at? There was Safi Ma'at. Ma'at, which was the infusion of Ma'at. That you can't put something together without mixing some Ma'at in it. It's like the way you cook, you got to put something in it to make it right. Let me try to make this even clearer. You can't make gumbo without putting okra in it. It could be soup. Right? But until you put the okra in it, it ain't gumbo. You see? So the infusion of Ma'at is that there's a critical piece in it, the mixture of it. This Safi Ma'at is found in our science, in our ancient science, as well as in the aesthetic and in the art. You see what I'm doing here? I'm showing you that the disciplines that we've all struggled with trying to understand at a surface level have to be understood more deeply in terms of our ground. What ground do we stand on in terms of our culture and our philosophy? And you have to understand Ma'at as second Ma'at. Another Ma'at. The power of Ma'at. The way Ma'at serves as a force to make things done, to do things. That's Ma'at, which takes expression as political science. The politic that a people engage in has to be driven by the force of Ma'at. There's also this notion of second Ma'at as Ma'at in education, in terms of pedagogy. How do we have a classroom practice that does not, in the practice, create a sense of one's divinity? We go through all this education and come out with this haunting virus that says that maybe I'm not quite as good. Black people go through all this education and come out having some self-doubt about themselves. See, that's a violation of second Ma'at. And then there's Shabin Ma'at. Ma'at, which has to do with being an expression or being in accordance with. Being in accordance with. Having to do with what we might call sociology or economics. How do I engage in the distribution of wealth in a society without it being in accordance with what ground I stand on as African people. And finally, there's Sechi, Maat, which has to do with the illumination. That you see Maat in its expression, in its glow. Is what in my own work, I'm arguing we should shift from psychology to Sakusheti, to a study of the illumination of the human spirit. That psychology is too constraining, it's too inefficient, it's too limiting to understand the fullness of African people. We have to have another discipline in order to understand who we are. But our mathematics, our history, our psychology, all are tied to this notion of the illumination of Ma'at. Ma'at then becomes the foundation of this stuff that we call Afrocentricity. See, Afrocentricity is not just this sort of black people having their own black flavor of ice cream. But the ice cream is defined by white folk. And then we can get to have one of the 32 flavors. You see, that's not what it's about. It is about recognizing that we stand on solid ground. But we have to understand that ground. We can't romanticize that ground. We can't just take that ground for granted. We have to begin to understand that this notion of our Afrocentricity or African-centeredness has to do with the fact that as human beings, and that's what we are, we're humans. As human beings, we have ancestral rights and spiritual connections to all of Africa. And that in understanding those ancestral rights, that's different from individual rights. See the difference here? We're not arguing for individual rights. We're talking about ancestral rights. So that I have a right to the Dogon. I have a right to the Bantu. I have a right to the Fulani. I have a right to the Ga. I have a right to the Ashanti. I have ancestral rights to all the deep wells of African deep thought. And I must go into those deep wells. Go into that deep thought to fully understand our way. See, when we just raise that concept, ancestral rights, as Africans in captive in America, we just raised that idea that Africans were stolen, we were kidnapped, we were enslaved, we lost the fight. As men, we don't want to admit that. See, as men, we don't want to admit that someone came into our house, kicked our ass, and took our children. See, that just saying that makes you mad. You know, but we don't. So we don't want to admit that. As men, we don't want to admit that somebody came into your house, kicked your butt, raped your wife, took your children, and then came back to you and made you serve them. See, so there's sort of some resentment. And it's so psychologically deep that we don't want to address it. See, we don't want to address it. When we look at these issues, we can't even imagine. You look at Beloved, you look at Sankofa, you look at these movies, you see this drama going on. And brothers sit in silence because this shit is deep. I mean, this is some deep stuff here. We have to realize that while we were on the Gold Coast, on the Ivory Coast, on the Niger Delta, we got all this good history going on. That we the Bantu, we the Wolof, we the Mandinka, we the I'm an Ashanti because they were warriors. Well, no, some folk were not warriors because the fact of the matter is that they came into our house. So they came into our house, so don't make no difference whether I'm a Mandinka or an Ashanti. Don't make no difference. They came into our house, kicked our butts, took our children. And we got to really deal with that psychological damage. We deal with the violence that has occurred. We got to deal with what Fanon says about the levels of violence and what it means, because it's not even an argument for payback, even though payback ain't so bad. But I would not encourage folk because there's no value in their house. I don't need to waste my time kicking down their door and going to get something they got because they don't have nothing of value. You see? So I'm not going. I don't want you to all get confused now and figure, tit for tat. Well, if they rape my wife, I'm gonna rape their wife. No, their wife is vulgar anyway, so don't defile yourself. You see? So we have to understand what we have to do here in terms of these issues. We have to look at our wells. Those deep cultural wells, and look at what happens in terms of the Lebo of Senegal, who talk about vital energy and life force and life soul and representing the spiritual heart. They talk about this thing called the fit. FIT, the fifth.